Time to take a coding break. Howdy, Coder Pros, and welcome back to another episode of the Coding Break Podcast. I am your Coding Break Reminder, your medical coding coach, as well as your medical coding instructor, Tam Talk, and here to discuss all things medical coding related. So on today's Coding Break, I want to talk about analyzing denial services or claims. Again, I'll repeat that. How do we analyze denials as it relates to medical coding? So the information that I'm about to share with you is how I analyze or get to the root cause of a coding denial. Now, I've worked in several healthcare organizations and several healthcare coding departments, and the process seems to be different. However, on this episode or on this coding break, I want to share how I would analyze a coding denial regardless of where I am working as a medical coder. So this is not the end all be all. Again, the process is contingent upon the employer or the organization, but nonetheless, this is my approach to how I would resolve or analyze a coding denial. So the first step is, okay, I'm receiving the coding denial, or I have received the coding denial. So once I receive the coding denial, the first thing I look at is the procedure and diagnosis dynamics. So what CPT code and what diagnosis or ICD-10 code did they report out? Okay, so what's the dynamic with that? So when I say dynamics, like, okay, based upon the payer, did it meet medical necessity? Is there some type of guidance or literature from that specific payer in regards to this particular service? And if so, what are they stating as their guidance? How do they deem medical necessity? How do they deem this particular service should be reported or the code should be reported? So once I reviewed that information, and if at that point I have not discovered what the issue is as it relates to coding, then I proceed to look at demographics, like, is the patient demographic correct? Did we submit it as a female when the patient was actually a male? What's the age? Is the coding that we submitted, is it appropriate for a male or a female? So there's different things that you have to look at or ask yourself, or questions you have to ask yourself in order to get to the root cause of the denial. And sometimes it may not even be a coding denial. Let's start there. So once we look at the coding, so pretty much that's an audit. So I'm going back and auditing the particular encounter. So if there's, again, the CPT codes and diagnosis codes submitted, I'm going to look at pretty much going back to recode or to audit that particular encounter or that claim, just to ensure that the coder selected the right codes, or maybe they were a digit off or they didn't code out to the highest specificity, or maybe there's one little thing that changed the code. So I look at that, and again, once I look at all that information and confirm that the coding is correct, and then I'm going to proceed to the demographic information. Is the demographic information correct? Is the patient information correct? Is the date of birth, the name, the spelling of the name, the address, the gender, the ethnicity, all of those things to confirm that is correct. And so again, if that is the issue, then of course we're going to make sure we update that to the most accurate or the correct information based on what we have or the patient presented with. Okay, so once I do that, or let's say I'm going to pick it back to the coding, if I find that the coding is off or is inaccurate based upon the services that were provided or documented by the healthcare professional, then if it's inaccurate, then of course we're going to submit an appeal with the updated information, correct information, and go from there. Now, if the coding is accurate and the patient demographic is accurate, then I would consider that to no longer be a coding denial. We would have, at that point, try to figure out why was it actually denied, because at that point, the coding has been reviewed and it is accurate. The patient demographics has been reviewed and it is also accurate. Then there is obviously another reason why that claim was denied, and it's not coding related. So again, this is it's a quick step. Put it like this, the way that I'm explaining it seems very quick, but it can become a tedious process, especially again on the organization, the processes of that organization where certain things are held, such as documentation, again, guidance from the insurance company, and things of that nature. So all these things play a part in it. So pretty much you have to ask yourself these questions: the who, what, the when, where, the why, and the how. So again, if it is a coding denial, the first thing I do is look at what was actually reported to the insurance company or the insurance carrier. So once I see what was reported, and again, that goes based on the procedural or CPT code, as well as the ICD-10 codes that were reported. And if there's any other things such as modifiers or HCPCS codes, I'm reviewing all of that as well. Going back to the actual documentation, pretty much I'm doing an audit to see what the coder was reviewing when they were selecting or determining the codes to report to the insurance company or to add to the claim. If those codes are accurate, then it's not a coding issue. Again, then I'm going to proceed to the patient demographics. However, if I find that the coding was off, then that solves that issue. But I'm also going to look at the patient demographics to ensure that everything is on point there, because you don't want to correct the coding and then submit the claim again and then it gets denied again, but this time it's denied for another reason. So again, this is your opportunity as a coder or medical or health information professional to review the claim in its entirety to ensure once it goes back out the door that it is accurate. So like I said, although I am explaining it very quickly, sometimes it could be a tedious review, because again, it's going to be based on the process of that organization and how quickly the coder or the reviewer is able to obtain that information that they need to review that particular denial and correct it if it needs to be corrected and appeal it. So that's all that I have for this coding break. And as always, code on. And if you have any other questions or any other topics you'd like for me to discuss with you, please hit me with a DM on the social medias, or you can send one to an email. As always, code on. Until next time.